This is the last one of a series of hiking presentations that I've called collectively The Hiking Gospel According to Brian. And it includes an introduction, exercise hiking metabolism, theory and practice of hiking poles, becoming a better hiker, and this particular one on leading club hikes. And the purpose of this presentation is to take the collective wisdom from the leaders of 3 clubs that have provided input to this presentation about all the things they would like to pass on to new or to other people who are aspiring to be hike leaders. We're always in need of new hike leaders, so consider being a hike leader, and hopefully after you looked at this presentation, you'll have a better idea of what's involved and whether you want to do it or not. So first of all, the characteristics of a hike leader. Common sense to manage things that are unplanned. Things will happen that you didn't plan, and how to handle that is important. Honesty, particularly when you're explaining things and talking with people, they can tell when you're faking it. And so being open in a way which enables them to feel secure is a good characteristic. You got to enjoy hiking. You got to keep it fun and help to make it fun for others too. Of course, you've got to have some familiarity with at least a few hikes, and getting some help with that from previous experienced leaders is a good way of getting into the field. Sometimes you have to make decisions, and that's sort of part of the leadership qualities. You've got to ask people some input as appropriate and then make a decision and go with it. Be open to feedback. You will get feedback. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. Being able to handle that is part of the job. And being able to tactfully correct people and deal with personalities is an important characteristic as well. Some first aid and CPR training, if at all possible, because at some point you're probably going to need it. And then some sense of direction. Yeah, you can have tracks and GPS, but you need to know sort of where you're going. The rewards, the joys of leadership, if you will. You'll be able to pick the hike, how fast you go, when, where you take the breaks. You'll have the joy of introducing others to something that you enjoy, a particular hike or particular area. You're likely to make a mistake or two. It happens to all of us. Leading the hike, you'll see more birds and critters than those who are following you. And as one of our leaders says, you'll break a few spider webs because you're out front, especially early in the morning. Before you even start preparing, there are some things you need to find out or know. What are your club rules and protocols regarding sign-up sheets and all sorts of different things? What does the club require? What's the requirements of the hiking area? Are there permits needed? Is there a group size maximum? What sort of boundaries are there to the area you're planning on hiking? How many cars can fit in the trailhead? And what are the daylight hours? Now, most of the time that's not going to be an issue, but it could well be an issue if you start running out of daylight, or if an emergency occurs, if things are really slower than anticipated. And most importantly, what's the weather forecast for that area, for that specific area, for that particular day? All of the hike leaders that I consulted say that the biggest issue is the fact you've got people typically of a variation of hiking ability. Only if you've got a small group of 3 or 4 of you that hike together frequently are you likely to be homogeneous. Most of the time people are going to hike with different abilities, different speeds, different capabilities. So help people help you by helping them to pick appropriate hikes by provide good description of your hike with the data. We'll get to that here in just a minute. And then the assessment of hiking abilities. When you're gathering, can you tell by looking? The answer is no. Some people that look very fit and healthy are not very good hikers, and vice versa. It always helps if you hiked with someone before, you know what their capabilities, what their preferences are. Some say that you should require references. In other words, if you don't know that person, you should perhaps only allow them on your hike if someone else vouches for them and does so willingly. That's your choice, it's your hike. But always, however you assess their hiking capabilities, always make sure that they have the proper gear. And if they don't, you have the choice to prevent them from taking that hike with you. So this comes down to the degree of control of the hike at the beginning and during. Are you going to be strict or flexible? Well, here are your options. The strictest one is everyone's behind the leader and in front of the sweep. And it's highlighted because this is generally what a lot of us default to. Allowing faster hikers to go ahead and wait at designated spots, splitting into two groups with two leaders and two sweeps are all fraught with difficulty, and we have all been burned by these options on occasion. So if you're new to leading, then start with a fairly tight control. However, if you're in a familiar, trusted group of people you've hiked with over a number of years, then perhaps you can give them more flexibility as to how you manage the hike. But again, err on the side of caution, and that is keeping the whole group together. Again, you have the power of veto. Be prepared to deny hikers if you know they're not capable of that particular hike, or if you decide that they don't have the appropriate gear. So what do you do to get ready? Well, first of all, of course, you've got to pick the hike. Start with something that's well known to you, ones that you enjoy doing, one that's appropriate for the season, the summer or winter. Decide on the size of your group, and generally speaking, if you have no idea, start with smaller groups with a maximum of 12 people. 12 typically is the limit that some of the park areas and forest areas require, no more than 12. So that's a good number to have as a maximum. Provide accurate descriptions so people can see if it's the hike for them. While some generic adjectives like easy, moderate, strenuous helps, but that's very subjective. Give them some numbers. How far is it? How much elevation gain? How fast are we going to go? Any special considerations? Yeah, you're going to have to climb up with your hands over a certain area. Give a clear meeting point and departure time, and explain that that's when the group leaves. So don't show up at that time because we'll be leaving without you. So arrive earlier, be ready to leave at the designated time. This is pretty traditional for most clubs. Explain the carpool expectations. Sometimes you can't all go in your own vehicle because there's not enough space in the trailhead. Other times, like with COVID, we have to modify things. So what are the gas price sharing expectations, things like that. Familiarize yourself with the hike. If it's not one you've done recently, then re-hike it, pre-hike it. Note the recent changes, perhaps get a track using one of the apps or a GPS. Plan for a bailout option or a turnaround point, for example, if it's a loop that you're not coming out and back. And then decide whether an assistant could go back with an individual who might be having difficulty. Assume that someone's going to have a problem and figure out how you're going to handle it while the hike is going. Check the weather routinely and watch it during the hike. That means looking at the sky. If you see clouds building, if you hear thunder and lightning, then those are considerations for changing what you're going to be doing. The leader and the sweep, for anything over a few people, should have radios so they can communicate, especially if someone's at the back having difficulty. And ideally, the sweep should know the hike as well and be able to take someone back or to go on the hike if there's a break that no one recognizes and you split into two groups inadvertently. The leader should also carry additional gear, in particular extra food, extra water, some batteries, gels, electrolyte energy gels. Amazingly how one of these can revive someone very quickly in a few minutes and enable them to continue the hike. You need a good first aid kit, including over-the-counter drugs and NSAIDs like aspirin or Tylenol or ibuprofen. The GPS or map compass in the old school way of doing things, or a smartphone app with a track in the newer way of doing things. Pocket knife, Leatherman type tools are always handy for a variety of reasons. If you're out in a more remote or it's a potentially more hazardous hike, then it certainly doesn't hurt to have a beacon and some even more additional gear to spend a night out if there's potential for not getting back, if someone's hurt or something like that. Then once that's all part of the planning and your preparation, now it's the day of and you're arriving early, welcoming people as they arrive. You're surreptitiously looking at their gear, making sure they got some good footwear. I like to figure out who has water bottles in a pack versus hydration packs, because if someone has a bottle in a pack, that tells me I'm going to have to stop more frequently so that they can take that pack off and take a drink. Introduce yourself, your assistants, and the sweep. Encourage socialization, but our rule of thumb for most clubs is no political or religious conversations. As I like to joke sometimes, it's for safety reasons. We like to socialize, but we don't want to get into fights or arguments. At the briefing, review the plan. Distance, gain, time, gradient, exposure, how much control. If you expect everyone to stay together, tell them. When you're going to take the breaks, how many breaks you're going to take. Are there any bathrooms at the trailhead or further down, or not? Usually not. Point out specific issues for this hike. For example, what additional hazards are there? Cat claw will draw blood, will rip clothes. Marbles, the round conglomerate, will make hiking a little trickier. Do you have to go over a stream or other water? Talk about protecting the environment, particularly if there's something like cryptobiotic soil, tortoise burrows, or fragile rock formations. Is the rock loose or friable? Is it going to break off when you hold on to it or not? Talk about tricky spots where your hands may be needed. Get some idea of how comfortable people are with that. Tell them if they dislodge a rock to warn those below. Shout out rock. And ask participants if they have any medical issues that you should be aware of to talk to you privately before you actually start the hike. This enables you to make some adjustments and be aware if that person might be having some other issue. Then explain the degree of control you expect. Explain that there's a need for patience, to be kind and helpful to each other. This is a social group activity where we'd like to help each other. Tell them that they must tell you, if all the sweep, if they're in any difficulty at all, if they feel ill, if they need a break for any reason, if they need to go to McDonald's, and especially if they run out of water. Hiking should be fun. Tell them that they should be enjoying this. During the hike, well, start slowly. it takes 10 or 15 minutes for the body to get warmed up and for the mechanisms of the musculature and the blood flow to work properly, as we describe in module 2 of this series. You need to look behind frequently. You're in front, so you got to have your head on a swivel, as many people say. Count the heads every now and then. Watch for gaps opening up. Check and adjust your pace so you keep everyone together during the hike. Be prepared to abort the hike. A couple of reasons. If someone's having some difficulty, if one turns back, they all turn back. Or you send someone back. We'll talk about that briefly in a minute. If the weather gets bad, if it gets really, really hot, if there's lightning, that may cause some potential risk. When you take breaks, then there's a number of times to take breaks. One is after the first hill, or if there's no hills, early on, to enable people to take off a jacket or a layer as we warm up. You need to take breaks to enable water breaks for those who need to get their bottles out from somewhere. And then take at least one nice 10 to 15 minute break during the hike, hopefully somewhere about halfway, in an area that's scenic, where there's something to sit on, when perhaps there are shade or sun options, and especially where the restart is downhill, or at least flat. Sometimes it's hard to get going again if the break gets of any significance in going downhill to start off again is an easy way of taking care of that issue. Make sure people are eating during a break. You need to refuel during any hike, and especially longer ones. Talk to people, find out about them, especially newer hikes, encourage them, or those at the back of the line that you don't get a chance to talk with. Don't make the breaks too long because muscles do stiffen up. Hike the plan, but don't get too fixated on the track. Give yourself some options, be flexible, and respond to circumstances. If you're in an unfamiliar area, don't wing it, because the chances are it will turn out bad. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Often there's more experienced hikers in the group or people that know the area. Ask for the hike, but it's your hike. Don't let someone commandeer it away from you. Point out things of interest, what the peaks are, plants or animals that you see. And warn people if the conditions change. Warn people of low branches or loose rocks or anything like that that's a little different. Assign a person to help with difficult spots. Sometimes there's, one little place where someone might need a hand up. Get someone to stay at that spot while you bring the others onto the next part of the hike, but make sure you wait for them, because it's going to take longer for everyone to get through that spot. Be sensitive to the mood of the group and their collective fatigue. Listen to differences of opinion or concerns, but do so non-defensively, but it's still your hike. You remain in the lead, you make the decisions. And then, because we're environmentally sensitive people, we want to carry out any trash that's found. Helium balloons are one that we're always finding. But don't take out artifacts. If it's been there for more than 50 years, it's an artifact. Leave it there. So emergencies are all come in a variety of shapes and sizes. If it's minor, render first aid. Know where you are at all times, especially before calling or sending for help. Here are your options if a hiker is unable to continue. The picture is on Ben Nevis, where we all had to turn around because a hiker was having difficulty. You can have an assistant take a person back, or go out via a bailout route, perhaps a shortcut to where the cars are. If you have cell phone coverage, you can call for help. 911 always works if you've got cell phone coverage. If you have a spot or some other emergency beacon, that's another option, especially if it's text capable. Or if someone is injured, then you can stabilize them and send someone out to bring help to you, especially if you don't have any cell phone coverage. Don't be afraid to abort the hike. So after the hike, and make sure everyone signs out, check everyone's okay, make sure all the cars start before you leave them in the parking lot, and try and get some feedback and learn from it. We all improve with feedback from those that have participated in our hikes. Make any announcements about upcoming club events or upcoming hikes, and provide feedback to the club leadership, such as, yeah, let's never do that hike again, that was a disaster. Or, yeah, I'd like to do that again. Or, the bottom line here is, I love this quotation from Kay. If the hike doesn't work out, it was still a hike, and everyone should be happy that they learned something, not to mention that they have a story to tell. So think about this. If you're interested in leading hikes, then talk with the club officials and get someone to perhaps mentor you as you take over and enjoy the pleasure of leading club hikes.